We're going to talk about the god-awful phrase, concept of whiteness. That is our going free, connected to our going free lesson of the day. Is this it? Yes, it is. This is from, and this has been printed several times, coming from this, what's this guy's? Is his name here? Yeah, Donald Moss. And many others, of course. Whiteness. What is whiteness, ladies and gentlemen? We've talked about the anti-white concept, whiteness, numerous times. It, of course, is pseudoscience. It is claptrap. It comes from nothing but anti-white prigs who leer down superciliously at you and attempt to define us and our people. And regrettably, some take it up. But I am happy to report to all of you, who stopped using anti-whiteness after we talked about it, that you did the right thing. This is spreading. Whiteness, the anti-white concept, the anti-white slur of whiteness is spreading into more and more journals, into more and more academic fissures of hell. Let me read to you. This is what whiteness is. And you say, Jason, how do you know that this is what whiteness means? I mean, Jason, if I look it up in the dictionary, it's just like the anti-white concept racism. It means anyone, and racism means anyone can practice it. Well, no, it doesn't. What is the difference? It is the actionable definition. It is the definition that is in people's minds that matter, not what is in the rule book. This is the definition of whiteness. It is the actionable definition. The dictionary is irrelevant. This is the peak of academia. And as the peak of academia, it means that it is going to be all of academia, the definition for all of academia, the definition for all of those who graduate and go on to work in the news and entertainment media. It is going to be the actionable definition for all businesses, for all national and international corporations, for all state, county, and federal governments. This is the actionable definition, the only one. Whiteness is a condition one first acquires and then one has. A malignant, parasitic-like condition to which white people, put in quotes, as though white people don't exist, have a particular susceptibility. The condition is found. Let me stop right there for a moment. You see how protean the anti-whites are. They will claim that you don't exist and that you do exist at the same time to achieve an anti-white objective. You have to know who you are up against, because you can bind yourself by no more rules or ethics or morality or rules of fair play or what have you than your adversary, your victimizer. Does that make sense? The condition is foundational. It is what this anti-white is saying. It is what you are built on. It is fundamental. It is quintessential to who and what you are as a Westman, according to the anti-whites, generating characteristic ways of being in one's body. By the way, I'll stop right there, because many people get tripped up when they are confronted with anti-whites who say, well, whiteness is a condition, it's not a people. Right, anti-white. So as long as a white person is violently anti-white, then they don't have whiteness, correct? That is how you catch the anti-white out. That is how you catch them. As long as a white person doesn't hate Westernkind, as long as they don't work actively to destroy Western civilization, then they have whiteness. How many super educated, overly educated academic peacocks, how many How many folks out there who self-proclaimed authorities on these things continue to fail magnificently when confronted with this? And that is all you need to say. When the anti-white, they have done this to be slippery as possible, folks. When the anti-white says, well, whiteness is not a people, it's something you can be or have or catch, then you point out what a white person has to be and do and believe to not have whiteness, which reveals what the anti-white is doing. Got it? The condition is found. Now, what's important, folks, is that we have just shared that here. And now you take what we have just shared and you share it with everyone else. And by doing so, it spreads because it defeats this anti-white argument, this concept, this poison, this meme pathogen. The condition is foundational. You don't, by the way, I'm going to stop again. You don't try to recreate what I just said. You don't try to rewrite it. You don't try to rethink it. When you see content producers, thought and organizational leaders trying to rewrite, recreate, rearticulate what I just said, you're seeing somebody who is serving their own ego rather than the well-being of our people. I just gave that to everyone so that the smallest, the biggest, the brightest, the dumbest, the fattest, the skinniest, the best looking, the ugliest, they all can defeat the anti-whites. They don't ever have to even know who I ever was. They can get it through somebody you gave it to and 20 links down the chain. The condition is foundational, generating characteristic ways of being in one's body, in one's mind, in one's world. Parasitic whiteness. Now, you see it's been growing, by the way, over the past few years, the concept of whiteness, and it will continue to metastasize because that's what meme pathogens do. What is whiteness? A meme pathogen. Parasitic whiteness renders its hosts' appetites voracious, insatiable, and perverse. Well, who defines that? The anti-whites do. You have 2 cars? Your family have 2 cars? You have 4 children? Then your appetites, if you're white, are voracious, insatiable, and perverse. They get to define this. What am I not doing? What am I doing that is very different? And therefore, what do you do? I was speaking with the great Brant Danger the other day, and we were talking about drawing the best with your message. Because if you draw the best to you with your message, then things will just continually improve. If you draw losers to your message, things will continually get worse. You want with your message to draw the best so that they can contribute what you otherwise could not have come up with. I've had that happen for me countless times. So what am I not doing? I'm not pointing out the hypocrisy. I'm not pointing out how it's not fair that we can't say the same thing about them. I'm not pointing out this guy's race. I mean, I cannot believe I feel at times, I feel like I don't drink, I don't use drugs, but I feel like I'm intoxicated. I feel like I'm drugged every time I turn around. I've been, as I say, 27 years using anti-white and anti-whiteism, standing up for our people since 11 years of age, 2 decades in the white sympathetic spheres. And I still see people, the first thing they do upon seeing something like this is not address what the anti-whites are up to and how to defend ourselves, but they immediately go to early life sections as though proving that this moss belongs to another race resolves everything. It does nothing. It doesn't matter what race Donald Moss is because he's anti-white. That's all that matters. You don't do anything when you talk about the hypocrisy. You don't do anything when you talk about how it's unfair that we can't do the same to them. You don't do anything when you point out the race of the person behind it. You accomplish nothing. And if that hurts, it should. Parasitic whiteness renders its host appetites voracious, insatiable, and perverse. These deformed appetites particularly target non-white peoples. So what was just said there? That white people are the villain. White people are the villain. What can they do with whiteness, though? What can they do with it? And this is when you get hung up on all of these trivialities, on all of this inconsequential garbage. You are unable to see this. I don't. Maybe it is an intelligence question. I have some people keep telling me that it's an intelligence issue. What can the anti-whites do with whiteness? The concept whiteness, anti-white slur. They can use it against non-white people who object to anti-whiteism. Are you ready to see those who play the villain in the anti-white narrative get humiliatingly defeated by anti-whites in debate when the anti-whites point out that this or that non-white person has whiteness, is suffering from whiteness? The argument that all those who play the villain, the argument that everyone else, conservatives and Republicans, the arguments that they use will lose. We are the only ones defeating the anti-whites. Do not fall into the trap. You just read here and you just heard here that whiteness will be used by anti-whites against everyone who gets in the way of inflicting harm on Westernkind and destroying Western civilization. If you're able to say that ahead of time, if you're already armed with that knowledge in your discussions with friends and foes alike, you will be able to defeat them. You will be able to bring people over to our lexicon and dialectics and going free. Once established, Moss goes on, these appetites are nearly impossible to eliminate. So you see, you are incurable. Everybody who gets in the way of anti-whiteism is incurable. In other words, you have to spend your life, if you're white, white-guilted, and as anti-white as possible to do what? What do I say in my Born Guilty book? What do I say at the very beginning? Let me grab one. Just so you can know whether or not you came to the right place if you're new. The back of the book states this, quote, "Prove you aren't racist." You could very easily say, prove you don't have whiteness. What is the long-term psychological and emotional costs of living in a system that presumes your guilt when you are not actively proving your innocence? I'm going to read that again from the back of Born Guilty. What is the long-term psychological and emotional cost of living in a system that presumes your guilt when you are not actively proving your innocence? I wrote that a long time ago. Don't you wish, especially if you have babies, that people were listening a long time ago? So the anti-white Moss, I could so make fun of him right now. I'm just going to get through this because we're at the bottom of the hour. Is saying right here what I, a very long time ago, told the world the anti-whites were up to, what anti-whiteism was all about. Moss goes on. Effective treatment consists of a combination of psychic and social historical interventions. Well, why don't you go ahead and try to disembroil that, and you will see, we don't have time to do it now, you will see that that sort of sentence justifies everything that they have been doing, the craziest things. Children in chains in elementary school, in primary school, so they can learn, white children, so they can learn what it's like to have been a slave, so they can learn what it's like to have been whipped, so they can learn what it's like. You white young boys, you stand up. If you're Christian and white and male, stand up in the room and everybody can see that you are the persecutors. That is justified with the verbiage here. And it will be increasingly, this verbiage and the ideas that are derived therefrom will be used to justify and before even the justification, to create programs that are going to be out of this world. And what's going to happen? Well, those of us going free, the adults in the room, will be working on correcting things. Everybody else will be running around like their hair is on fire, talking about how, have you seen the new shocking thing? Can you believe it? And they'll have the best gallows glee, won't they? They'll have the best worst story of the day. First on Twitter, first on Gab. Then they'll be first to stream and everybody will be watching. 30,000, 50,000, 80,000 watching these people. Can you believe the outrage? Yes, we can. Because we saw it long before the anti-whites put it into effect. It's in our rearview mirror. It's just now hitting you in the face because you are an imbecile. Moss continues, such interventions can reasonably aim only to reshape Whiteness's infiltrated appetites, to reduce their intensity. Follow closely. Infiltrated appetites. I wish we had more time. To reduce their intensity. Redistribute their aims. Redistribute their aims. What were we talking about, folks? He goes on, and occasionally turn those aims toward the work of reparation. Now, if you are one of these typical vacuous, hollow-headed, I don't know, I want to say, I guess, conservatives or white sympathetic, overt or implicit folks, you're just going to hear the word reparation, and you're just going to read that, or you're just going to read the word redistribute, and you're going to see those things for as superficial as possible because you are down the hall in the regular midwit class, or even worse, in the midget wit class. What this is actually saying, in far too much detail that we have time for, is what I was saying moments ago. You will have to be viciously anti-white in everything you do. These will be the rules by which the anti-whites, if we do not recapture our destiny, these will be the rules by which they determine whether or not you can have social media, whether or not you can travel, use air flight, whether or not you have the right to self-defense, whether or not you have the right to leave the country. Here's something that conservatives or cuck-servatives will get, and the basic hollow-headed, midget-witted, and mid-witted folks out there. Remember communism? I know you love that word so much. Remember communism? They didn't let people leave the country. Seeing it again? Come on now. We will lead you to the promised land. And you're going to have to leave the 1950s behind in Mayberry. Moss continues in his demonic way. When remembered and represented, the ravages wreaked by the chronic condition can function either as a warning, never again. So, in other words, incessant anti-whiteism, incessant, or as a temptation, great again. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, if you are not incessantly, verbosely, physically anti-white, then you are endeavoring to be the demon in the anti-white narrative. You won't have to play the villain as you had to in the past. You'll be a villain because you are not destroying Westernkind and Western civilization. That is how the anti-whites are framing the conversation for the future. Are you going to be there before they get to the field so that we can hold the high ground and win that day? Or are you going to continue to be a reactionary twit and wait for them to get there, hold the high ground, and decimate us? Memorialization alone, therefore, is no guarantee against regression. Lifelong thing. There is not yet a permanent cure. There never will be. This is anti-whiteism is an insane cult, a runaway train. Its objective is the victimization of Westernkind, white erasure, the destruction of Western civilization, white erasure of Western civilization. The definition of whiteness, its actionable definition, is this. It is what the others, who wrote about it. No Ignatieff, what they wrote about it, what he wrote about it, rather. W.E.B. Du Bois. Where this originated, what's written about it in the dictionary is irrelevant. Does it make sense to use anti-white concepts like racism and whiteness, neoterized and or at least made actionable by Noel Ignatieff, Leon Trotsky, W.E.B. Du Bois? Seriously. Does it make any sense to use their concepts? Do they have white well-being at heart? We are not whiteness. Our biospiritual manifestations are not whiteness. We do not produce whiteness. We produce Western civilization. We produce Western culture. Do not allow anti-whites to trivialize and downplay our biospirit by saying that it produces something as aesthetically hideous as whiteness. Do not fall for their trap of defining us. Anti-whites practice anti-whiteism. They do not practice anti-whiteness. Do you see the trap? Do you see the trap? If you adopt that they are anti-whiteness and you object, that makes you for whiteness. And that means that you are for oppression. And all of those other ugly things that are now the actionable definition. Why in God's name would you allow your victimizer to define who and what you are? Whiteness is what you have after spending an evening with a prostitute.